The Dawn Through the Night by GerrysJackie, Chapter 19. 3 weeks had passed since that night. Eric had grown even more cold and aloof, making for a very long 3 weeks. He had not spoken to Christine at any point, but remained remote and detached, probably thinking that was what she wanted. She would feel his eyes on her as she passed by him, or when he thought she wasn't looking, and she longed to run into his arms and pick up where they had left off. She knew that an opportunity would present itself, and when it did, she would be waiting. One morning in early July, Christine had volunteered to go to the shops and get the needed items for the pantry. She had not had much of a chance to get out lately, and thought this might be a good time. She stood in the marketplace buying produce and meat. Nancy had come with her, thinking they might need 4 hands instead of 2. "It is her, Mabel, I told you so," Christine heard the whispers coming from behind her. "She's Mr. Dessler's governess, but look at her. I guarantee she's more to him than that," a whiny, high-pitched voice stated. Christine heard another voice, this one younger. "How could she not be with a man like that?" she commented. "I practically swoon in church whenever he speaks to me or looks at me. He's so handsome. How tragic about his face." "Well, if you ask me, she must be his mistress. I hear she has a child." Christine willed herself to shrink into the woodwork until she heard all 3 voices in unison whisper, just loud enough for her to hear, "Tramp." She whirled around and took the women off guard, stopping their wagging tongues with her words. "I'll have you know, Eric Dessler and I were married in a quiet ceremony over a month ago. So you see, I am more than just his governess." She stormed off, leaving gaping mouths and shocked eyes. As she stalked away, she couldn't believe the audacity they had to begin with, but she also couldn't believe she'd said what she did. Nancy stood in stunned shock as she watched the whole exchange, wondering what had caused such an outburst from Christine. Christine grabbed her purchases, placed them in boxes, grabbed Nancy's arm, and they waltzed out the door, not giving the busybodies another thought. It was a week later before she heard anything more about it. Eric slammed the door shut and unceremoniously stomped up the stairs and knocked on Christine's door. He was breathing heavily from the fury that was racing through him. Christine opened the door and immediately knew something was wrong. His eyes were the color of burgeoning seas whipped up by storms. She wasn't sure why he was angry with her. Even though he was angry, at least he was going to talk to her. She drank in the sight of him as though she had not seen him for days. He had become tan from working with the men outside and overseeing his building project. His hair was a bit tousled tonight, with a strand hanging down in his eyes. Brigitte and Madeline were in the room also, having come over to see Grace and Jean-Luc. Eric greeted his mother with a kiss on the cheek and nodded to Brigitte. Nancy had followed him up the stairs to see what the door slamming had been about. Eric turned toward her and with quiet control asked, "Nancy, would you please take Grace and Jean-Luc to the park across the street? I need some time to discuss some personal matters with Ms. Daae." Nancy did as he asked, while Eric stood with erect shoulders and a perturbed stance, waiting for her to leave the room. Nancy cast Christine a "hope you can stand the heat" look, waited for Brigitte and Madeline to move past her, and shut the door. Eric stood deathly still for a few minutes before turning to Christine. She could see something in his features that she had not seen for some time, distrust toward her. "You come into my home, follow your own agenda, deliberately disobey me at every possible turn and on every subject, and now—" He turned from her and walked out onto the balcony. Christine had dutifully followed him onto the balcony, not knowing what was troubling him. She saw the rigidness of his shoulders and the stern stance of his legs. This can't be good, she thought to herself. He turned back around and handed the paper to Christine. "And now, you mock me." Christine took the paper as he swept past her and back into the room. He took a seat by the fireplace, closed his eyes, held his forehead in his hands, and massaged the throbbing pain that persisted. "It has come to this reporter's attention, through a reliable source, that our own famous architect, Eric Dessler, aka the Phantom of the Opera, has recently undergone nuptials that we were unaware of. He has entered into wedded bliss with none other than Christine Daae, his former pupil and current governess. Congratulations to the happy couple." Christine put a hand to her mouth as she read. They had taken what she had meant as a means to an end and turned it against Eric. She had not meant for that incident to go any further than the market, but she had not even thought about the repercussions of her lie. I don't know what to say, Eric. I'm sorry, Christine said in a small voice. Eric continued to rub his aching head. What were you thinking, aligning yourself with one such as I? Christine furrowed her brow, not sure what he meant by that. She went to him and knelt beside the chair he sat in. You deliberately made those women think you were married to me. His voice emphasized me as if it were a bad thing. Me, of all people. He still thought she despised him. What if your ex-husband decides to pay us a visit, Eric mused. He knows my name and the paper is distributed all over France. Christine had thought of that, but she knew Raoul and his family. He won't, she stated. How do you know? Eric asked, not fully convinced. Christine smiled. Believe me, Raoul has long since married Lady Victoria Wraithford. His family won't risk the scandal that would arise from dredging up the past. He hung his head. I pray that you are correct. I am, she replied. Christine placed her hands on his, and was happy to see that he did not recoil from her touch. Instead, he did not react at all, as if she'd never touched him. Eric, I really am sorry. They made me angry with their words and accusations. I acted on impulse. Eric lifted his eyes to hers and was surprised to see a genuine concern on her face. He had thought this was just another way she was using to get his ire up. I'm sorry if I hurt your reputation or made things hard at the workplace, Christine continued. Eric chuckled, a low, beautiful sound that came from deep inside his chest, but there was a weariness in its tone. I can manage all of that. The smile left his face and it was replaced with sadness. The only way for me to make this right is to marry you, he said, not averting his eyes. Eric was relieved that she hadn't bolted from the room. He had given this a great deal of thought and knew this was the best solution. He stood up from the chair and helped her into a standing position. I'm sorry, Christine. I know this isn't what you want, Eric stated, looking down at her. This will only be for a few months, long enough for me to include you, Jean-Luc into my estate. Then we can quietly divorce. His words were so full of pain that it hurt for Christine to hear them. You'll have everything you wanted. Money, freedom. He looked down at his hands as they held hers, pain constricting his chest. My heart, he thought. Christine jerked her head up to look at him, but he was already removing himself from her presence. She ran up behind him and placed her hand on his arm, feeling him tremble beneath her touch. Eric, she stated, capturing his attention. We will wed tomorrow in a private ceremony at the church. Everything has been arranged. He turned distressing eyes to her, but tried to smile. I promise you, my dear, it won't be for long, and it will be in name only. Christine could not even find her voice as he walked away from her. This was not how she had planned to get him back into her life, but it would work. His words indicated that he did not intend to test the boundaries of their mutual attraction, so Christine determined that she, alone, would have to do the testing. She sought him out, assuming he'd gone to his study. She quietly approached the slightly open door. She heard Eric's voice coming from inside, and his words were aggrieved and choked. She did it, Nancy. She found a way, he stated. She found a way to take Grace away from me and destroy my life once and for all. Christine startled at his words. Is that what he thought? Why would he think she meant to take Grace away from him? Why would anyone want to do that? It was obvious that she adored him and he was an excellent father. Master? Christine heard Nancy ask. Eric groaned, a mournful low sound that made Christine wince. How am I going to endure having her as my wife and not yield my heart and... He didn't complete that sentence, but Christine could only guess what he referred to. She heard him moving about in his room. I'll have to watch as she takes Grace away from me, one word or deed at a time, and then finally, when everyone has left me again, maybe I'll be allowed to die. The fact that he feared she would take Grace away from him was so laughable that it didn't even warrant it being worthy of thought. She would have come up with ways to make sure he acted upon his desire to touch her, and as his wife, those opportunities were going to be endless. Christine was determined to give him a marriage she would not so easily put aside. To be continued.